Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Lam here. In today's video, I want to get a chance to talk about the Canon R6. Now this particular camera body, I really didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it, and it was for one specific reason, and I've kind of rethought about it, so I do want to readdress this because it is kind of important right now. Obviously the R5 pretty much stole the show and it got all of the attention, but the R6, a lot of people said this is going to be the workhorse camera because it's well priced, it's well balanced. When I looked at the price point for this, I always thought that it was $300 to $500 overpriced, and that's the reason why I kind of just excluded it. I really didn't think about it because I just thought it was overpriced, and I'm a type of person, if you've been watching this channel, I liked used gear because there's so much used gear out there. I really just wasn't going to pay full price for this camera, but you know what? Things change, and I do want a moment to kind of readdress that. One of the reasons why I want to do that is because if you look down here, this camera body is made in Japan. So obviously Japan is one of the countries that I do want to support. I want to be able to support countries and companies that have my same value set, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So when I think about that, and after looking at it and thinking about it for quite a while, to pay an extra $300 to $500, is that something that's acceptable to me? And honestly, for the last couple of months, I've been really hunting down products that were made in the United States, and I've had a pretty good track record, believe it or not. If you look hard enough and you're willing to ask questions and you're willing to wait for the products to come, pretty much any household product, there is a made in America equivalent. Now, I'm in the United States, so if you're in another country, I always say support your local or domestic manufacturing, because right now I'm pretty sure almost every country is struggling economically. That kind of mentality is pretty much flowing over to this Canon R6, which I'm willing to pay a little bit more money, $500, it's probably a lot of bit more money, but I'm willing to pay that extra bit if it was made in Japan. It's something that I've been kind of stressing over the last few weeks. So that's the reason why I have this camera in my hand, because I did want to give it a shot. Just so that we're clear on this, this isn't actually my camera body or my lens. I actually borrowed it from somebody and it's on loan for about a week. So I definitely want to run through it, see if I like it. A lot of times when I do my unboxing videos for my Fuji cameras, I always say I don't read the manuals. When I actually switch over to a new camera brand, I actually do read the manuals, but not the paper copy, because the paper copy isn't very helpful. What I usually do is I go ahead and find the PDF version online, and then I read that one because I can easily search through it, because I really don't need to read every page. I'm usually just looking for specific things that I need more clarification on. So it's really helpful to have the PDF copy. And for the last couple of days now, I've had this for about 2 days. Really, I've just spent time reading over the menu system and trying to get familiar with the menu system. And like all cameras, there's just a bunch of things in here. But let's go ahead and get into the camera system itself. Been using it for the last couple of days, and I definitely need a little bit more time on it, but overall it's been a very positive experience. Now, if we go through my priority list of things that I look for in the camera, one of the first ones that I always talk about is dynamic range, and this one actually doesn't disappoint, which is great, because traditionally Canon has always struggled a little bit with dynamic range in their camera systems. It's the reason why I've always kind of chosen the Nikon systems, because I always felt that dynamic range over on the Nikon cameras were superior to that of Canon. But on this particular one, I'm very happy with the dynamic range. I'm also very happy with the battery life. I've been using it for a couple of hours now, shooting a lot of videos, and the battery's holding up. So it can definitely last half a day, which means if you have 2 batteries, it could probably last you the full day, which is kind of what I really want to carry around. Now, one thing that I did notice is that when I've been recording a lot of video on this, it does get warm, and the time limit on the actual camera system itself does go down every once in a while. So it can definitely overheat, but I don't think it's really too much of a problem, and it does cool down fairly well, so I don't think that's of an issue. But I really do need to do a little bit more testing on this in order to figure out if overheating is going to be a problem. One of the problems that we have at the warehouse where we do a lot of our shoots is that it's not really well air conditioned upstairs. It just gets a little bit warm, so all of our equipment is going to be naturally warm, so things can overheat very quickly up there if we're not careful, especially over the summertime. Moving on to the IBIS system. The IBIS IBIS system, from what everybody says, has been terrific. So I really don't have anything to counteract that. I've always said this, I really like having IBIS inside of the camera system, especially with the Canon systems, because some of their best glass in the RF lens lineup don't have optical image stabilization. So that IBIS system, if you want the ultimate image quality, you're going to need IBIS, and this kind of satisfies the requirement. And in the R5, of course, you also have IBIS. So this is definitely a good camera system to invest in if you're going after those premium prime lenses in the Canon lineup. I've been mainly using this for video, and it's held up really well in terms of being able to use it very quickly in a run and gun setting, being able to vlog with it. One thing that did surprise me is this cheaper kit lens. It's actually really light. So when you actually have this setup in which you have the cheaper 24 to 105, it's relatively light. If you add a Rode Mic Go on here, I think this is actually a pretty good vlogging setup. It's definitely bulkier than the Fuji setup, but in terms of weight, it's actually very easy to deal with, and that's something that I always look for in the camera. So in terms of just grab and go, run and gun, I actually like the overall weight. It's a little bit more bulkier, but that's okay. Audio quality coming out of this seems to be pretty good. I wouldn't call it stellar, but that's pretty much all camera systems in this price range, something that you can actually very easily use. The flippy screen is terrific. I like how they place the mic jack. When you actually place the mic jack, you can actually still flip the screen without actually having to worry about hitting the mic jack. So that's some really good design there. So in terms of it having as a grab and go video setup, it is really good. Now, when it comes to photography, it holds up really well. The shutter is also really quiet because of the IBIS system that's in here. Pretty much any of the camera system with an IBIS setting will have a really quiet shutter. That's something that I've just come to expect, and this one doesn't disappoint. So I'm trying to keep the video short. So is there anything that I don't like about this camera system, especially coming from the Fuji systems? I would say there are a few, but they're minor. Pretty much any camera systems nowadays are going to be terrific. I think you can just do pretty much spectacular things with any of the camera brands nowadays. So the things that I'm going to point out are kind of personal gripes. So just keep that in mind. One of the things that I don't like about the menu system is that they don't really condense all of the video settings into one subsection, which they do on the Fuji cameras. I've actually come to really like that. I can just easily go to that video section and find all the video settings that I want. In the Canon menu systems, it's a little bit more spread out, but they're pretty easy to find because the menus are very well laid out and the control systems is very easy to use. But again, it's one of those small gripes. Another thing that I'm kind of struggling with, and I've been doing a lot of side-by-side comparison with my X-H1, is that I still prefer the Fuji color science. I've been looking back and forth for the last couple of days now, and what I've been trying to do is I'm trying to get close to what I've been getting with my Fuji cameras, and it's a slow process because the color science between two different camera brands is very different. One of the reasons why I like these mirrorless systems is that I really don't want to do a whole lot of post-processing. I don't really want to mess with color wheels or LUTs. I really do want to just use the color science right out of camera, get right into my audio editing, and then really start editing the video together. I am really appreciative of fast workflows, and from the Fuji systems, I've been able to do that for my YouTube channel, and it's something that I'm trying to reproduce in this R6 because it's definitely a camera that I'm interested in getting even at the premium price point. One of the interesting things that Canon decided to do was they decided to put a 20 megapixel sensor in this one, and that's kind of an interesting choice to me because when you look at this on paper and you look at it with an EOS R that has a 30 megapixel camera, when you compare it to side by side in, say, a department store, when somebody looks at it side by side, they pretty much have equivalent specs, but the one that's going to stick out the most is that this has a 20 megapixel sensor, and the Canon EOS R, which is the last generation, has a 30 megapixel sensor. That's going to put a lot of pause in a lot of consumers because they just might not know the subtle differences on why this is going to be a better overall camera, especially if you're going after some of the high-end primes, which doesn't have optical image stabilization. This is just going to be a far better setup because of that built-in IBIS system. But overall, really great system, but I think the EOS R is still going to be very competitive in terms of people wanting to buy that if they don't really dig into the specs and really read into the reviews, because It's a 30 megapixel sensor, and when you just read the little card, the specs on these two line up really well. You really don't know that this is a more capable camera system unless you actually go out there, read the reviews, and really dig into the camera specs and really understand what you're buying into with the R6. I do think this is a much more capable system, but I think a lot of people will be enticed by the R because it's going to be like $600, $700 cheaper, and it has a 30 megapixel sensor. It almost feels like Canon doesn't really want to get rid of the EOS R. In other words, they still want to continue manufacturing that camera along with the R6, but making the R6 lean a little bit towards video. It's a little bit less megapixels, which means for video, there's going to be less data it needs to read because you only need about, I think, 12 megapixels for 4K or something like that. I don't really remember off the top of my head, but 20 megapixels is definitely more than enough, especially if you're just publishing a lot of your images straight to the internet. This is back on my radar. I think it's a great camera system, and I'm going to continue using it. If you have any questions for me on this particular camera system while I still have it, please let me know in the comments below, because pretty much the whole next week I'm really going to be working very hard on this camera system before I have to give it back, so I can kind of make a judgment call on whether or not I want to order this. So that's all I have to talk about this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're safe, I hope you're healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.